Hello. Today we're going to look at Affinity Designer. I've already got it open here. Um, this interface is just the way I've arranged it. It looks different when you first open it, but this kind of suits me. Um, it looks like a vector app, a standard vector app. I've used a few. I used to use Freehand quite a long time ago, and so I sort of immediately knew my way around it really without too much hassle. Um, the first image I tried, just going to take you on a quick overview. The first image I tried was a pretty standard vector sort of style. I quite like this style. I enjoy doing it. Uh, but the next image, I was trying to figure out a way to make smoke. If I just go to the outline view mode, select a few of these. And yeah, smoke, tricky thing to do really in vector, unless it's really stylized. Um, and that at that point, I discovered texture brushes. Now these are all they're vector curves, but the brush head is a bitmap head, so you can make your own bitmap heads and create a new texture intensity brush to get pretty much any effect you want. So having discovered this, I made some smoky type brush heads, and yeah, it's not perfect, but it's working. It works the way I sort of wanted it to work. Um, so the discovery of these texture intensity brushes changed quite a lot, changed the way I think about this app. I suddenly started thinking in terms of digital painting rather than creating vector images. So I started experimenting with a few brush heads. Let me show you. And I'm really enjoying the results at the moment. These all started as vector brushes. Let me do this quickly. Um, all started as vector curves. Click on the node tool, so that image follows the curve. And you can do lots of different things to edit a stroke, kind of things you can't really do with a pixel based stroke. I'll go into that more later. So that was enjoyable. And once I'd created a few brushes, I thought I'd try and make quite a loose, a loosely painted image. This one, which I tweeted, and got a few positive comments. Because you don't think of a vector app as being able to do this kind of thing, and it's brilliant. It's really growing on me. I love this app. I've already started using it for a few commercial projects, and it's just handled itself brilliantly. And one of the big things I like about it is this. Um, that is an AO document. I'm going to zoom that in. AO document, massive, over a meter high, inches, 47 inches, pixels, 14,000 pixels high. Pretty amazing. Whoops, just put a margin in there. Let me remove that. So that's massive. So yeah, and yet, despite the fact that it's such a huge document, you can still paint with pretty big brush strokes in real time. That's a 14,000 pixel high document which is crazy. So I'm just going to close all those now, and we'll have a bit of a mess about. Brush, brush. Right, the first thing to mention is there aren't any blending brushes. That's important to some people, but for me, as long as you've got variable opacity in a brush, it doesn't bother me. You just kind of adapt, really. As you can see, this is an AO document. As before, why would you paint on anything smaller? I'm just gonna, let's choose a brush. I don't know, this one is one of my favourites. So that's a stroke. Pretty responsive. You do the brushes go up to 4096 pixels, and yes, at that size you do get some lag, but forgivable, really, considering what it's doing. So let's look at a stroke. One stroke. There's one stroke. If I go to outline view mode, that's the stroke. A vector curve. And we know it's a vector curve because the layer here says curve in brackets, and Affinity Designer will always tell you whether it's a curve or a pixel layer you're working on. So exit outline mode. I'm using the node tool at the moment, which means I can select on any of these nodes and mess with that single stroke. So what else can we do? I'm going to run through a few possibilities. There are so many, ridiculous. I'm going to start with a gradient. You can put a gradient along that stroke by choosing the gradient tool, fill tool, sorry, and the context is stroke rather than fill. Just drag that fill, and here we have that gradient. So you can change the nodes. You can even reduce the opacity of that side of the gradient. This line here is the midpoint between those two parts of the gradient. You can shift that. You can add other nodes. Madness. In fact, so you could do all that from up there, or you can do it using the fill tool. Add other nodes. Sorry. There it is. Fill tool. Double click to add another node. You can change its colour. And once you've done that, any other stroke retains that gradient, unless you choose a solid colour sort of thing. Right, what else can you do with a stroke? I'm just going to choose that stroke. You'll notice here in the layers panel that each stroke is a curve on its own layer, and if you're not careful that soon piles up, so I'll talk about that in a bit, but for now I'm going to get rid of all these other strokes. Just concentrate on this one. What else can we do? Right, we can obviously, after the fact, change the colour. Obviously. We can also, I am up here, just in case you didn't see that, I'm up here in the colour panel. Change colour. we can, if we now go to the layers panel, there, we can add an effect, FX, any one of these. So that, for example, is a real-time non-destructive Gaussian blur. And if I put that curve in a group, any other stroke I paint within that group, yeah, right, rewind. So if I add that Gaussian blur to the group, not the stroke, any other curve I put in that group is blurred in real time. You can switch that effect off any time you want without affecting the actual stroke. Eventually that will slow down your slow down the interface kind of thing, those effects. But that's pretty amazing. It's quite a flexible way of doing it. There are all these other ones, outer glow, inner glow, all the kind of stuff that you'll know about if you've used any kind of creative app, really. Good, yeah, good. I can hear you all saying it. Right, one stroke. What else can we do? Here you can see that this slider only goes up to 100. But with any text field in Affinity Designer, you can manually input a number, any kind of number that you want. So we can change the thickness of that line. Color. We can also, oh yeah, that's the effects panel. You can click on that button, or you can go to the effects. But we can also add all these adjustments. Again, they're non-destructive. You can switch them on or off, and that is the same as clicking on this button here. So let me turn that into a black and white. Nah, let me not. Let me do something else. Recolor it. There you go. Saturation. What? That goes off. In it. Good. What else can you do? Oh yeah, stroke dynamics. Right, so each line I make is the same line. You can see, if you look hard, that there's a repeating pattern there. And you can add a certain amount of dynamics. It's not as much as pixel brushes, but if you double click on the brush, this is the panel that you get to edit with. Got various options there, but these here, size variance and opacity variance. I paint, but nothing's happened. There's no size or opacity variation, and that's because if we go up here, controller, this gives you several options. I'm gonna change that to pressure, and now light, heavy, light, heavy, light, heavy. So you can see once the controller is set, you have some kind of dynamics, you know, which does help. And yeah, there's a load more. Once you've got a stroke which has had dynamics applied, back in this stroke panel here, you can see this pressure. If you click on that, wait a minute. So if you click on that, these are the dynamics, and you can actually change those. After the stroke has been made. Is there no end to this genius? All this stuff on its own, you might think, well, what use is that? Because when you're painting, you're just painting. But, you know, you kind of find ways to use it to suit your own style, really. And it's just brilliant to have it there. Where did he go? There. So that's strokes. Excellent. Now then, layers. So I've made a few curves there, and you can see that each curve is on its own layer, and you can imagine in the course of a painting you're making thousands of these. So if you want to select a particular curve, it starts getting really complicated. And also, when you have got thousands of curves, the interface does slow down, and it does sort of interrupt your flow. So there are a few ways of dealing with that. The first thing I learned to do quite quickly, quite soon on, is to use groups and layers. Yeah, what did I do? Groups and layers. So as it stands, all those curves that are there, I can select them all, Command G or right click group. So now I've got all those in a group, and I can affect them globally. But you can see that as I'm shrinking that group, the overall pattern is changing. Each stroke looks like it's moving of its own accord, and that is because in the stroke panel I haven't got scale with objects selected. So if I press that, the next time I resize them, they resize as you'd expect them to, as a whole coherent kind of thing. There, resize, non-uniform. If I place my cursor until those two arrows appear on any one of these control nodes, you can skew. And as before, you can add effects to the whole group and adjustments. Good. So, groups. But really, as soon as I open a document now, I create a layer, because it's good to start off with managing things properly, really. Groups can sit inside layers, and layers can sit inside groups. Tra-la-la. Management. Important. Obviously you can rename this stuff. La-la. So now you've been painting for a while. Tra-la, tra-la, tra-la. And all these different strokes are starting to slow your interface down. To the point where yeah, it starts getting quite difficult. I've not reached that point. Oh yeah, look, they're starting to. I've not reached that point yet. Are they? Starting to stutter here. And that's all getting, you know, oh God, let me try and... I'd like to select that one. Oh no, it's selected a different one. What the heck? select that. Oh no, it's selected a different one. So when you're at this stage, if you want to select a particular stroke, that as it stands starts getting quite difficult. You've got all these different curves. And by the way, if you know what curve you want, let's say this one here, if you double click in the layers panel, it takes you to it, which is good. But if you don't know what curve you want, if you can't see it because it's behind another one, I found that going to outline view mode and using the node tool makes it much easier to select any particular curve. Much easier. Look at that. And I've set a keyboard shortcut to Command Y so I can toggle between those modes faster. In fact, on my Wacom pen I've set the right button to do that because I found I was doing it quite a lot. So that's good. So that's one way. But yeah, when things start getting really heavy and your the interface does start slowing down a lot. Here's a background I made, and you know, I've had more strokes in other paintings before I've got to a stage where it stutters, but anyway, this particular one, for some reason, seems quite slow. See that? Stroke, wait, paint. And that's starting to get a bit slightly unusable. But there is a way back from that. I'm going to delete those strokes. So this background is made up of 3 layers, and each layer has a certain number of different toned curves in them. Here we go, all of those. So I can flatten all of those layers into a single pixel layer, and that will free up resources and let me paint vector curves in real time again. And you do that by not flatten image, not merge layers as it is in pretty much any other app. You do that by choosing rasterize, and that converts any layer, any group into a pixel layer. So I'm going to do that again. I'm going to zoom in with my zoomy zoom tool. So at the moment that's a vector curve. If I rasterize, it's turned to a pixel curve, and I can't use that as a vector curve anymore because it's been flattened. And now that at this point, keep all those as curves for now. That's the one stroke that I've turned into a pixel curve, and now if I want to further edit that stroke I would have to go to, up here, top left, pixel persona, and that gives me a range of all the usual kind of painting tools that you'd find in Photoshop or ArtRage or any other kind of app, smudge, but yeah, you know, again on a document this big, pixel tools are going to be slower. And in fact, while I'm here, let me demonstrate the difference between no, actually, right, I can break that. So once I've flattened this whole background group, I can put that back in there, and when you rasterize, you can rasterize both curves and pixel layers together. but rather than merge layers or flatten an image, or as you might do in Photoshop, you would put all your strokes into a single layer, a group or a layer, and then you rasterize that layer. And sometimes that takes quite a little while to figure out what it's doing, but eventually, I'll speed this bit up, but eventually it will flatten to pixels. There. And now it says pixel in brackets. There's only one layer, there are no groups anymore. And that layer is now a flat pixel layer. But it means that you can now carry on creating other vector layers. And that performance that you had when you first started at painting on the document comes back. Real time, big brushes on AO document. So as you go along, I've found, anyway for me, you sort of get to a certain stage. When you're happy with it, I just flatten it to pixels and then carry on painting. And that means, really, that just means that you can paint on massive documents in real time, which is great. So yes, I'm going to go backwards a step slightly just to do a test. I'm going to compare a pixel stroke with a vector stroke on an AO document, just to illustrate. Right, so this is a textured pixel brush. I'll just make him. Here we go. Paint. Wait. Oh, here it goes. There it goes. That was a bit sluggish. So now if we go to Draw Persona, choose a pixel brush. Not the pixel. Choose a vector brush. What am I doing? I've changed all those, didn't I? Yeah. Choose a. Is that the same size? It's about the same size. Bigger. Vector brush. Stroke paint. Stroke paint. So the difference is clearer there. The pixel brushes, I think they might have more dynamics involved, but you know, I'm quite happy with the textures of all these brushes I've made. So for most situations so far, and you know, it's just good that you can mix and match. I'm really enjoying this system where you can just flip between vector and pixel personas. Brilliant, all good. And that is my overview. Get rid of these chaps. Brushes. I've been making these brushes. You can obviously make your own, but anyway, if you like the look of them, once Affinity Designer 1.6 is released, I think I might just release these brushes as well. A little charge, won't charge much, probably £2 or something like that, just to give you some options. I already sell some commercial brushes for Art Rage, and I made some of the brushes that ended up in there as native brushes in the app. And so, yeah, I think I'll release these. If you're interested, I shall probably do another one of these videos just highlighting all of these brushes. Thank you very much for listening in. See you soon. Bye.